Hey Alex, how are you?
Hey Dirk, doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well. Great to see you. Welcome everybody to this special Smith Fine Arts Series event, Talking Tunes with Alex Hargreaves. Um, I know we're all very excited to have Alex here. I guess it's one of the good things about uh, the lockdown and the COVID times is that it's pretty unlikely that Alex was going to be home free on a Saturday night in April. So it's great that we can spend some time with you now. I'm Dirk Freymuth. I'm the booking director of the Smith Fine Arts Series. I'd like to start by giving a shout out to the Smith Fine Arts Series program director Lisa Schachter for putting this event together and the rest of the Smith Fine Arts board. Also, a shout out to our tech team, Andy Mooring and Peter Putman. They are working behind the scenes to keep this flowing smoothly. This is a kind of new Zoom experience. I feel like I've spent half my life on Zoom for the past year, but this is the first time in an event like this where you can't see any of the other participants. So we do know that there's a lot of you out there. So thanks for registering in advance and being here tonight. Um, I know you all got some backstory about Alex, and I just want to say a few words for myself about when I first came across Alex. First time I heard him play actually was on YouTube, and it was. I guess it must have been 12 or 13 years ago now, or something like that. And I had actually just played a concert. I was still living in Minnesota, and I had played a concert with a couple of very fine fiddle players out there. And after the concert, one of them was very excited to show some YouTube videos of this young, phenomenal fiddle player. I remember you were, I don't know where you were jamming with some people and you were playing some Texas style Western swing. And you were improvising a lot in it, and it was just, we were really all taken aback at just the technical mastery and the inventiveness of your improvising at such an early age, and those two fiddlers were like, this guy is going to be a superstar. And shortly after that, I came to Oregon to start teaching at WOU. But that summer before, I was actually up in Seattle when Prairie Home Companion did that outdoor summer event at that vineyard up there. And you were playing with Sarah Jaros, and I was like, that's the guy. And also had just worked out that that you were David Hargreaves' son, who was actually on my search committee when I got hired. And of course, by then I knew that your dad's also a serious musician himself. But it was just all like, oh wow, there he is. And so I've been really enjoying tracking your career over the past decade or so, and I just have to say that I just think you're one of the most astonishing young musicians that I've been aware of for quite some time, and also you being a leading figure among really a new generation of musicians who are really are crossing genres. I mean, you have mastery in so many different genres, but there seems to be a cohort of you that work together a lot, and you're really kind of redefining what it means to be a fiddler, what it means to operate in a certain genre, and stretching the boundaries of those genres, and also being such amazing improvisers too, which isn't always the case with some of the trad players. So it's just been great to see where your career has taken you, and I also get the sense that really you're just getting started in many respects. So it's great to have you here. Thanks for being here. You know that this event we've asked our people who register for the event to be able to submit questions, and I've got a bunch of those questions put together here. We'll get to those soon enough, but right now I know we'd all just love to hear you play some tunes, so why don't we get into it?
All right. Well, it's so great to be here, and Dirk, thank you so much for the kind words, and thanks to the Smith Fine Arts Series for having me. I have so many good memories growing up, going to see concerts at Smith, and also getting to be a part of the program the last few years. So I'm going to start off with a set of some fiddle tunes that I like to play. And the first one is by the great Vassar Clements. It's called Crossing the Catskills.
Oh, it's so good.
Thank you.
Nothing like Vassar Clemens.
Yeah, totally, man. I love Vassar so much.
So it won't surprise you to know that a lot of the people who submitted questions are really interested in your childhood in Corvallis and
Sure.
how you got started in playing. And I wanted to ask, like, do you remember the very first time you ever had a fiddle or violin, for that matter, in your hands?
Right. I honestly don't remember the very first time. I have some very early memories messing around. My parents got me my first fiddle when I was 3, and for a while I started just kind of playing, messing around before taking formal lessons. My
Was
parents were
that a
always
half-size fiddle that they got you?
smaller than that. Whatever
Yeah,
the
quarter size.
Yeah, whatever the smallest is. I don't even remember what the size is,
Pocket
but
fiddle.
it's down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a while they're just kind of messing around, making up noises and sounds, and playing along or scratching along, I should say, with records. I was very lucky to grow up in a household that always had a lot of great music playing. My parents are both into a lot of various styles of music from around the world. So I think I was just kind of exposed to that and jamming along. And then when I was about 4, I started taking both fiddle lessons, learning fiddle tunes, and Suzuki lessons. So I don't have a clear memory of the first time I got the fiddle, but I remember a lot of just kind of experimentation and messing around with it.
When you were taking fiddle lessons, in addition to your Suzuki lessons, maybe you can talk a little bit about how that Suzuki method works, because it's different than your classical training, of course. But
Right.
with the fiddle lessons, was that just learning? Were you being taught by ear and learning tunes by rote, or were you dealing with notated music as
That
well?
was all by ear, and actually, that was very similar to the Suzuki method, at least at that stage. That's something that makes Suzuki unique from maybe other schools of learning in classical music. Is you start off learning by ear initially. That was, yeah, similar to how I was learning fiddle tunes, just kind of phrase by phrase. I would bring a tape recorder to the lesson, and you know learn it phrase by phrase with the teacher, and then have it recorded slowly, so I'd go back home and be able to reference that. And that's still to this day, I think, how I prefer to learn music, if possible.
Yeah. With your early fiddle lessons, were they in a particular style of music? Because I know you were really into kind of Texas style for a while, and I've heard you play Celtic music, and you play bluegrass music, and old time music, and Appalachian music, and all that. Were you kind of focused more in one area, or was it all sorts of things from the start?
Yeah, it was definitely geared more towards the Texas style side of things. So at that point, well, I was born in Eugene, Oregon, but then we moved down to Chico, California when I was less than a year old, and we lived there until I was 6, and then we moved back up to Corvallis. But at that time in Chico, there was a great fiddle player named Dan Overholt who lived in Chico, and he's a great Texas style fiddle player. So I was learning, very basic fiddle tunes you probably couldn't even put a genre label to, just like classic standard tunes, but then kind of from there getting into what you could call more of the Texas style, which is a really interesting kind of subgenre of old time fiddle music that came up in Texas that has a lot of other jazz influence as well. It's a really interesting style of music.
Yeah, it's something I might want to come back to, because Texas style is also, it does have a lot of improvising. There is crossover with jazz, but it's also very, well, it tends to be fast a lot of the time, and very, I mean, it's got such a drive to it. And when you're improvising, I mean, there's no time to mess around. I mean, you got to get in and start playing. And I
Right.
have to, I just always, it always struck me when I saw that early video of you, how how confident you were in of course, the technical mastery, but when it came to improvising, that you were just bringing it, and you have to in that style. And I just, it struck me that must have really set a really good foundation for you as an improviser moving forward, because I mean, you just got to commit.
Yeah, I think it really did. When I look back on my experience learning that music, I think it really helped pave the way for my interest getting into more improvisational styles because it definitely is. It's a very like theme and variation, melody based style of improvising, but it's still improvising. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and those fiddle players have it's such an art the way they improvise while still keeping the melody intact, but there's always, it's always spontaneous and exciting and all the elements that I love about improvising, and yet that thread of the melody is always there, which I always find really fascinating.
Well, getting back to your childhood, so you were in Chico when you were 6. Now, someone had some inside information here that evidently, when you were around 6 years old, you had an idea to start the Log Cabin Band.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is that still going to happen? And what
You
is it?
never know. I should never say never. And honestly, I'm very sorry to say I don't remember specifically what that is. But I remember, well, in Oregon, I would go jam at a log cabin with my dad and our good friends Ed and Linda Waymeyer. So I'm wondering if it's referring to that. But I have
Okay, well,
to dig deep
I
back in
didn't
there.
mean to catch you off guard.
It rings a bell somewhere way back in
Okay,
there.
okay, fair enough. Well, what you just mentioned that you used to play with your dad and some other musicians in the area. I heard you say that in some other interviews as well. What was the rest of the scene like? When did you come to Corvallis?
So yeah, that when I was about 7 years old in first grade, I started first grade in Corvallis.
Okay.
So yeah.
I mean, based on, when I first got to Corvallis, I was really surprised how a town that size had so many guitar stores and acoustic
Right.
guitar stores, and it really seemed like, oh yeah, there's got to be a pretty strong trad music scene here, folk roots scene, whatever it is. So was there you're probably able to go out and hear a lot of other players just in town.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel very grateful for the community there. Just, jam sessions and the different teachers I had, both in classical and fiddle music and in jazz. Like I really had, had opportunities to learn about all those different styles of music within Corvallis. So, yeah, I feel very grateful for that.
So when did you meet Jake Jolliff? Of course, that was such a great concert that you guys came out. We knew that Jake is also from Oregon, but also that you
Right.
guys are old friends. How was it that you met? He's not from Corvallis too, is he?
No, he's from Newburgh.
Oh, that's
So
right.
not too far away, but I think I first met Jake at the Darrington Bluegrass Festival, actually up in Washington. And I think I was probably about 10, so he would have been 12 or 13 at the time.
Mm.
And we had a lot of mutual friends, kind of through the Oregon bluegrass community, already. So I had heard about him, but we instantly hit it off, and then after that we ended up crossing paths at other festivals, and then we formed a band called the Hargreaves Jolliff Expedition. And
When was that?
that was probably a few years later when I was in middle school, maybe around 13 or 14. And around the same time, actually, both Jake and I got to be a part of this band called Pupville that David Grisman put together, with David's son Sam and a few other musicians around our same age. So that was a real huge moment for me, and getting to meet people like Jake and Sam and other folks my same age who were into playing bluegrass and this, weird style of music. That was really inspiring to me, and I think that was a big part of what kept me going.
Mm-hmm. So you were living in Corvallis until you left for college,
Yeah. Yep.
and you went to Berkeley.
Yeah.
In
Went to
Boston.
Berkeley in Boston.
Was there a connection that you had there? Had you made up your mind to go there, or was because you were part of a really innovative new program at Berkeley? I don't know how long that had been going, or if you were one of the earlier students to go. But had you decided you want to go to Berkeley before
It
that?
was it was definitely high up there on my list. I had a few different places I was considering and interested in. I knew that I wanted to study primarily jazz and improvised music and kind of just get more outside of my comfort zone. And I'd grown up in the string acoustic community, which I still kind of consider to be my family, but I really wanted to branch out and get into new things, and I was getting really into jazz, and so Berkeley was an obvious option for that, especially because they're very string friendly, which is not the case with all jazz schools. You can be a violinist and major in jazz at Berkeley. So that, and I knew a lot of people slightly older than me who had already been there. Matt Glazer, who at the time was the head of the strings department. I knew Matt, but kind of the tipping point for me was when I got into this program you were talking about called the Berkeley Global Jazz Institute. And I think that was just the second semester that program had been around. But I got accepted into that program the same time I got accepted to Berkeley. And that was really what made me decide to go with Berkeley. And it was this amazing program run by the pianist Danilo Perez. And it gave me all sorts of amazing opportunities to study with Danilo and other amazing musicians who would come in and work with us in like masterclass format, one-on-one ensembles. We got to travel and go to his festival in Panama, and it was really, talk about getting outside of my comfort zone. It was definitely that, and I learned quite a bit.
What was different about getting accepted to that program versus just getting accepted to Berklee College of Music?
Well, so that was a like a 2-year program within the performance division, and so you had to audition to get into that program, which so separate from Berkeley, which you also had to audition to get into. But this program, they only accepted. It got slightly larger over the years, but when I joined, there were basically only 2 ensembles, so about 15, 16 students total, I guess. And it just meant that you would get a lot of one-on-one time with Danilo and the other teachers he would bring in, like Joe Lovano and John Patitucci and people like that.
Do you have any standout moments from school when you think back of your time at any aha moments where you felt like you made a huge breakthrough?
Oh man, I feel like there were quite a few. Definitely on the rhythmic front, I feel like I had quite a few breakthroughs just studying with Danilo. He's such a deep musician in so many ways, but he's really gone deep into the rhythmic connection between Africa and Cuba, South America, and American jazz. And that was something I had just never really thought about or learned about before. And the way he talked about it in a way that was also very applicable to playing and learning these rhythms and playing in different styles and kind of finding the common thread between everything was definitely a big moment for me. And, it's such a deep dive. There's always something to learn in that department.
Sure. So
Yeah.
you must have met a lot of other great players at school in that program who were your age. Are those some of the people that we still see you playing with now? How many of your cohort are you still making music with?
Yeah, not so many in terms of people I was actually in that program with. There are some folks that I still see as much as possible who live in New York, who I try to play with every now and then. But in terms of like my touring gigs and stuff like that in the last few years, it's actually not there hasn't been that much overlap. I mean, it's such a small world. There's always some common tie or mutual friend there. But
Sure.
actually, yeah, not I haven't actually been playing with that many folks who I was in that program with. Unfortunately, I'd love to do more of that.
You
But
got time.
yeah, yeah.
Well, why don't you hit us with some more tunes?
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I was thinking about what to play, and I thought maybe since we were discussing Texas style fiddle music, and a big part of that language is kind of early jazz and ragtime, and another style of music that I'm really interested in and trying to learn more about is choro music from Brazil. And choro music, for those of you who don't know, was a style of music that kind of came around in the 20s and 30s, and was incorporating a lot of harmony that was going on in early jazz and ragtime, but then a lot of other elements and rhythms from Brazil as well. So I thought I'd maybe give you a glimpse into my crazy head, which is, thinking of choro music and Texas style fiddle music in the same light, for better or for worse. So I'm gonna just play two back to back. The first one is a tune by Jacob Jolliff Band, who's a major force in choro music. It's called Gostinho, and then I'll go into a tune called Beaumont Rag from there.
awesome.
Thanks.
Well, I've come to expect that you'd be full of surprises, but I gotta say, I didn't expect to hear a Jacob de Bandolim tune,
Oh
and
yeah.
I just want to say, I'm a huge fan of Jacob de Bandolim,
Oh, cool.
and fun fact, and maybe some of the people out there might even remember this. Seems like a lifetime ago, but 20 years ago, I played a concert as a guest artist at WOU in Rice, and it was an all Shoro concert.
No kidding. Oh
And
wow.
yeah, and at that time I had been introduced to Shoro by one of those two fiddlers who I mentioned the first time I heard you play, and one of them is Peter Ostushko,
Oh wow. Okay.
who
Yeah.
sadly passed away
That's right.
a couple of months ago, who became primarily associated with the mandolin,
Yeah.
um, and he was a huge Jacob fan, and
Okay.
he introduced me to Jacob, and we used to play quite a few Jacob tunes when we toured together. But I have such fond memories of just driving across Nebraska or something, listening to Jacob de Bandolim it never gets
Yeah.
old, it's just such joyous music and just such incredible playing, and so that was such a treat to hear you play that Jacob tune, and knowing that you're into Shoro music too.
Oh, thanks.
That's
Well, next
awesome.
time I see you in person, we'll have to play some together.
Yeah,
Play
I'll
some
break out my
choros.
cavaquinho.
Oh, all right. Yes.
All right. So after school, at some point you made the decision to move to New York. Is that something that you had already decided you were going to do um, when once you got out of school, or did it take a while to reach that decision?
Yeah, I think I kind of knew all along, I guess, that I wanted to end up there. It was the most obvious choice to me, and most of my close friends were either kind of in the process of moving there or had already been there for a while. I already knew a lot of folks living in New York when I moved out east to Boston too. And I was thinking about going to school in New York as well, but I ended up Boston was a nice it was a nice transition into New York City life, coming from Corvallis, Oregon. But yeah, it just kind of seemed like the logical next step, and I've been there ever since, and it's it's a special place for sure. It's led to a lot of really great musical opportunities, and I've met a lot of folks since I moved here that um have led to a lot of cool things. So I
Hmm.
ended up leaving for a little while when the pandemic first hit, but I've been back now for the last few months. So
Since you've been in New York, you've also established yourself as an educator. I mean, I'm sure you've been teaching for a while now, but you also teach at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music now.
yeah.
And I don't know exactly how long you've been there, but I do know that I'm interested to hear all the things you might be doing there. But I know that you have an Americana ensemble that you
Right.
direct, and I'm guessing that that's not an ensemble that might have existed before you were there.
Yeah, I mean it's my understanding that it's the first Americana ensemble at the new school, so it's quite an honor to be involved with that. And yeah, I've been teaching there now for a little over 2 years, I guess, and I also teach some private lessons occasionally through the new school, but primarily it's been the ensemble, which has been really cool. It's been great getting to work with all the students there, and some of them are primarily jazz musicians who are interested in learning something new. Some of them are already pretty steeped in Americana, and obviously Americana is a very broad term that can mean a
Sure.
lot of
So
different
is jazz.
things. Exactly, so is jazz, and there's obviously a lot of overlap between Americana and jazz, and so it's been a great learning experience and really inspiring for me getting to kind of figure out how to communicate this certain kinds of music that I grew up playing with jazz musicians, and kind of through the lens of jazz, which is something that I got into later on. And I always like to think there are more similarities than differences between everything, So I'm always trying to find that and treat the class just as, we work up material and repertoire, but I also try to incorporate, recordings and playing different styles of music for them, and just trying to, I don't have an agenda to be like, oh, this is what Americana is or anything like that. I just want to expose them to all the different possibilities that could be considered Americana, and maybe something might speak to one of them and that'll send them off in a direction,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've found over the years with young students that I mean, the breadth of knowledge that a lot of young students have now about the history of American different vernacular music types, popular music types, jazz, traditional music. I mean, it's really kind of blown me away how knowledgeable these students are. When you think, I teach a year-long American history, American popular music history class, and a lot of times, you like to think that you're introducing something for the first time to these kids, and they're like, it's just really surprising how their depth of knowledge already. I mean, it's very inspiring.
Absolutely.
And you also, of course, it's a cliche to say that you're the generation, your generation, forget about this generation, but going back for a while now, have had accessibility to everything. And it was not as easy to discover some of these different types of music, learn about them, much less hear them.
Right.
And so to know that they're, to come across young students who are really doing deep dives into early types of American popular music and really know what they're doing, know where it comes from, as well as maybe being able to play it. What have you found? Have you found that there's any, what kind of challenges do you think like some hardcore jazz musicians might have, like a real, dyed-in-the-wool hard bop players or something? Do you find that they have challenges with playing some of these types of music, or is it like a pretty easy to kind of recalibrate them somehow and get them slotted into some music they haven't played?
It's hard to make any sort of like generalized observation about that, but it does seem like one thing that I feel like a lot of different styles of like traditional folk music can offer is just like the kind of what I was talking about before about melody-based improvising, and just kind of improvising within those parameters. So you may not be working with much harmonically, like for instance, fiddle tunes are generally just 2 or 3 chords. So you can't really take the approach of blowing over the changes, or else, I mean, you can, but it can easily start sounding the same. Whereas it's like the melody is what makes it unique, but you can still really depart from, what you think of as the melody, but still improvising off of like melodic and like phrase material you get from it. So I feel like that's sometimes something that is interesting to work on with students like that, who might be really high level improvisers in a certain sense, but maybe haven't worked with those specific parameters, or the parameter of just playing diatonically, more or less, with a little bit of chromaticism, but figuring out still like how to still be inventive and expressive within like one mode or key center. And that's something that I love a lot of, my favorite fiddle players for is, finding those same elements of excitement and improvising, but not necessarily through the same means. Mm-hmm. So that's always really interesting.
Do you also have students coming into that class? Of course, at the new school now, the College of Performing Arts is also includes Mannes Conservatory. Do you have classical musicians coming over and playing in that group too sometimes?
Not yet. That hasn't happened yet since I've been teaching. But
have you had some students who come from that background and are looking for a way to learn how to do that?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, it's always fun for me working with like classical string players who are technically really advanced, but maybe new to playing folk music or improvising. And that is often like a really, it's a fun exploration in how you use the bow and how you feel time and rhythm, and like just like kind of the whole practice of subdividing and grooving with the bow. I feel like is a concept that's pretty foreign to a lot of classical musicians. So that's something I notice a lot, and obviously it goes both ways. Like I always love taking, as much as possible, I try to, I'll do lesson trades with classical violinists, and there's so much to learn from both sides, but as far as what I feel like I can offer, it's often kind of figuring out how to use the bow almost more like a pick, in a sense of just like relating to rhythm and groove in more of a subdivided way.
Well, on this topic, we talk about violinists and classical violinists on the one hand, and fiddlers
right
on the other hand. And I've seen in some of you, in descriptions of you in press and stuff, that you're a violinist and fiddler. And those things can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's easy to just see one and make assumptions, right? You might say, "Oh, fiddler. Well, that's someone who probably can't read music, learns by rote, and maybe improvises." Yes, depending on what type of fiddling they're doing. Some, like the Texas style, would require more improvising, where like Celtic fiddling doesn't take as much. I mean, there's plenty of inventiveness, of course, to the playing. And then violinists, you hear that word and you think, oh yeah, someone trained, reads music, comes from a certain type of technical training. And I'm wondering how you define those two things, if you just use the term interchangeably now, or if sometimes are you thinking more as a violinist versus a fiddler, or is that just doesn't matter anymore?
Yeah, I'd say it's more often than not, it's pretty interchangeable for me. But for it's understandable that people would be confused by that, and more often than not, fiddle refers to like folkloric styles, and violin refers to classical. But it's this exact same instrument. There's people sometimes wonder about that, but it's totally the same instrument. Sometimes fiddle players like to have the bridge slightly less curved because it allows you to have more access to multiple strings at once. But I have my instrument set up kind of to be able to do both, and it's really interchangeable. I've heard Itzhak Perlman call it a fiddle, so
yeah,
it's all the same stuff at the end of the day, I think. But I do, with that said, obviously, like there are, depending on the musical situation, it can definitely call for a very different technique or aesthetic for playing. And for a few years, I was in the Turtle Island Quartet, and they're amongst string quartets, they're way more on the jazz side of things, but still that was more of a classical medium than what I was used to performing in. Even though I'd grown up studying classical music, I haven't really performed it as much. So that was definitely more on the violin side of things, you could say.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Turtle Island, because we had Turtle Island out before you were in it, obviously, on the Smith series.
Okay.
And it was great. I mean, it was a really, really interesting blend of composed classical music and more obviously a lot of improvisation involved. Do you play any music now? Perform any music where you don't do any improvising? I mean, like a real class, like all you are expected to do, or allowed to do for that matter, is just play what's on the part in front of you, and don't stray from that.
Turtle Island was definitely maybe the closest to that I've experienced, but not a whole lot. I love practicing classical music, and I love listening to it. Classical music, just like jazz or Americana, it's such a broad term. But there's so much beautiful music out there in the classical world. So I get a lot of inspiration from it. But it's not what I spend like the majority of my time working on, I guess. I learned so much from practicing it, but to be a serious classical violinist, that's a huge time commitment, and you kind of have to be all in. So I don't put people through listening to me play it, but I love practicing it in the privacy of my room.
When you were out on the Smith series with Sam Reider, there was a lot of music there that was seemed very composed, arranged for
Yeah.
that ensemble. And what is that music actually written out, arranged in a score form, and you have parts, and then when it's time to break out and improvise more, you guys do. But
Yeah.
someone did the arrangement and you had a part to learn, or were they
It's kind of a
created?
combination. Yeah, a lot of it. Sam didn't really write out much of anything. It was mostly just. It started with us playing very casual like bar gigs around New York, and he would just show up with Sharpie charts with the chord symbols, and that was
Wow.
it. And then just kind of over time, we kind of just developed parts that became kind of set because it was like, well, this works here, so we might as well stick with it, And
Yeah.
but most of that wasn't actually written out in advance, but then it kind of became like a set part.
Hmm.
But I definitely have, nothing against doing that, and I definitely find myself in musical situations where, it seems like the best option is to just settle on a part, and like I try to avoid like improvising just for the sake of improvising. Like if that's what the music calls for, then great. But I also have nothing against just playing the same thing every night if that's what the music calls for, and that doesn't get old to me if it seems to be working for the music.
Right. So I'm just looking at the time here. I want to get definitely have you play us out with some more tunes, but I do have a couple more questions. And one is, how have you been spending the last year?
Good
I
question.
remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember I was out for a walk and I came across you walking. You're still out in Corvallis, and
That's
you're like,
right.
"Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm directing my ensemble and figuring out how to do it on Zoom, and just keeping things going and practicing and collaborating." We're all just like, "I don't know how this is gonna work." Um,
Right.
but here we are a year later, and
Yeah.
when I talked to you on the phone when we were setting this event up, you mentioned that you had been out in Nashville for a while, and I asked you to like, don't tell me what you were doing because I wanted to ask you now.
Yeah.
So, what were you doing in Nashville? How long were you there? And can we look forward to something coming out from that?
Yeah, well, so I was out in Oregon in Corvallis for about 6 months actually, which was great. It was a really, considering everything that was going on in the world, I was really lucky and grateful to be out there, and felt it just felt very inspiring in a lot of ways. But then I ended up, yeah, I kind of knew that I wanted to end up back in New York eventually. Um, but I was in no rush to get back here. It was the dead of winter, and I have a lot of really great friends in Nashville, and I had been talking with some folks about doing a collaborative record out there around the same time. So it kind of just worked out when I was there. It's still a little up in the air as far as when it might actually come out, but I did some recording with Noam Pikelny and Andrew Marlin and Chris Eldridge and Greg Garrison. It's kind of
Wow.
like a
Yeah.
bluegrass, basically a bluegrass project with other influences and everyone kind of bringing songs to the table. Um, but that was kind of part of the incentive to head to Nashville, was to be a part of that, and then also I was living with some really good friends of mine, and I got to play music with folks. It was still pretty nice outside at that point, so a lot of jamming outside. And one of my favorite fiddle players in the world, Billy Contreras, lives in Nashville, so I got to study with him again, which it had been quite a few years since I'd gotten to take some lessons from him. So it was just a really inspiring few months getting to spend there. And
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so good to hear that you weren't just holed up,
yeah.
that you actually tracked a record during this time. That's really great. Hey, tell us, you're back in. I don't know what part of Brooklyn you live in. I don't expect you to disclose your address or anything. But what I don't know what kind of neighborhood you live in. Like what do you see now when you look outside? It's a Saturday night in Brooklyn at 11 o'clock. Like, does it look like things are kind of getting back to normal? Is there action out there?
Yeah, slowly but surely things are starting to open up. I live in Lefferts Gardens area, which is kind of just east of Prospect Park for those of you who know Brooklyn. So it's kind of in the general vicinity of the park, and there's people now that it's starting to get nice out. First of all, people are playing outside in the park, and I had a jam session out there last week, and I haven't really been playing gigs around here yet. I have one kind of semi-regular gig in downtown Brooklyn, but it's slowly coming back, and I'm really excited to. You can kind of feel that energy in the air, so I'm excited to be here as things start opening up again, and people are starting to get vaxxed, and it seems like a lot of musicians are coming back to the city. So,
what are you seeing now for later in the year? I mean, we're on Smith Fine Arts Series. We're committed to starting up in person for the 2021-22 season. That'll be the beginning of October. We're feeling fairly confident that we'll have an audience back in a room and musicians on stage.
Great, yeah.
But I'm just becoming aware of concerts, that had been canceled. That it's just now starting. That people are like, okay, we're ready to get another date, and let's. We've like I said, committed to it. Are you finding that there's now you've got to make real plans and decide what to take? It's another question I had is I mean, you're so in demand. You play in so many of the other projects, and there must have been a number of projects that you were supposed to tour that didn't happen, and now once everything gets back up and running again, is it? I'm guessing it might be kind of complicated for you to decide, or schedule which ones you're able to do, and you have new projects coming out. Is that going to be a difficult set of decisions?
Yeah, I think it will be. It's also, at least so far for me, it's been actually pretty slow in terms of things coming back. I have some stuff with Sam Reider actually in the fall, but nothing this summer. And a handful of gigs this summer and some teaching opportunities, but it's trickling back in. And honestly, that's kind of fine with me at this point. I've been really grateful to have a lot of teaching work, which has been keeping me busy. And when I look back to what my life was like before the pandemic, it was I was playing music with a lot of amazing people, and I was really grateful for that. But it was also a really crazy lifestyle and schedule. And while I'm totally open to returning to that way of life, it's also nice to just have some time in one place. As long as I can stay busy somehow, I can get work through teaching and stuff like that. So I think I'm, maybe coming into things with a little bit of a different perspective in that sense, and just kind of valuing time at home more, and very excited to go back on the road when the opportunity presents itself. But I'm also in no rush, I guess. So I'm kind of just going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Going to see what happens, but also try to make the most of not being on the road too. And, New York is a place where you can not be on the road and still, play with a lot of people every night in different configurations. And
sure.
And I should say too, in terms of projects, I actually just put a record out with my good friends Grant Gordy and mandolin player Joe Walsh and bass player Greg Garrison. And it was something we actually recorded before the pandemic, but we were all just sitting around at home when COVID hit, and we ended up going through all the takes and mixing and editing and just put it out the other week. So I'm optimistic that project will maybe lead to some gigs too in the near future.
Awesome.
But yeah.
All right, Alex. Hey, we're coming up on 8 o'clock. We'd love to hear you play some more. So why don't you play us out, and I'll have a quick word, say goodbye to you after whatever set of tunes you're going to hit us with.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Well, I'll just play one tune for you guys. This is one by Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass, and it's called "The Old Dangerfield."
That was so fun.
Thanks.
Alex, thank you again. This was such a great event for us. Thanks to everyone out there. I can't see who's out there, but thanks for spending some time with the Smith Fine Arts series again. We can't wait to be back in person. Alex, can't wait to hear the new projects, new records, and most of all, can't wait to hear you live.
Thanks so much, Dirk. Thanks so much for having me. Really a pleasure to be a part of.
You bet. Best of luck. Take care.
All right, you too. Thanks so much, everyone.